I think it's time that we begin. Firstly, a very warm welcome to today's webinar, Breaking the Mold, Redefining Gender Roles. My name is Svetlana Tanasova, and I'm joining you today on behalf of Eurocarers, the European network representing informal carers and advocating for their recognition, rights, and better support policies across Europe. I'm very pleased to see such a strong interest in this topic and welcome participants from across Europe. Before we begin, just a few technical housekeeping points. The webinar is being held on Zoom, as you know. All participants are muted by default to ensure good sound quality, but you can unmute yourselves. The webinar will be recorded and is being recorded already now for reporting, documentation, and follow-up purposes. It will not be used for commercial purposes. Participation implies acceptance of this recording. You are warmly encouraged to use the chat box to post your questions throughout the session. We will collect them and address them during the moderated discussion later on. If time allows, we will also run a short live poll, so please stay engaged and share your perspectives. Now, regarding translations, to support accessibility and multilingual participation, live captions are available in Zoom. To activate them, look at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You will see live transcript or CC. Click on it. Then select show subtitles. If translation is enabled, you can choose your preferred language from the same menu. If you experience any technical issues, please write in the chat and we will try to assist you. Today's webinar is part of the Equal Care project. Full name of the project is Enhancing Gender Equality in the Disability Care Sector. The project runs for 24 months and is funded under the Citizens' Equality, Rights and Values Program of the European Union. The project responds to a reality that many of us recognize. Care work remains deeply gendered, both in formal and informal settings. Women continue to provide the majority of unpaid care across Europe, which often comes at significant personal, economic, and professional costs. Equal Care Project, therefore, aims to challenge gender stereotyping care, to improve the recognition and working conditions of carers, and to promote a more equal sharing of care responsibilities between women and men. Although the project focuses particularly on disability care sector, the issues were addressed are highly relevant across the broader care ecosystem, including informal care provided by family members and friends. The project brings together 10 partner organizations from 8 European countries, among them research institutes, civil society organizations, care providers, and European networks. The project coordinator is the European Association of Service Providers for Persons with Disabilities. And together within the consortium, we work with carers, professionals, policymakers, and social partners to ensure that care work, whether paid or unpaid, becomes more visible, better recognized, and more fairly supported. Today's webinar focuses specifically on gender roles in informal care. Despite increasing awareness of gender equality, women still carry most informal care responsibilities in Europe. This imbalance is deeply rooted in cultural expectations, institutional structures, and long-standing stereotypes about masculinity and care. So the aim of today's discussion is to explore why women still carry the majority of informal care responsibilities, how men can be encouraged and supported to engage more in family care, the benefits of shared responsibility and how we can challenge traditional narratives around masculinity and care, and what policies, campaigns, and or initiatives have proven or can be effective in changing traditional mindsets and promoting a more balanced distribution of care. At the end of the day, greater involvement of men in care is not only about fairness, it can really strengthen families, improve well-being, and make our care systems more sustainable. Now, before we move to the main presentations, just a quick final note. After the webinar, at the beginning of next week, we will send you a follow-up email, including a link to a short online evaluation form. Your feedback is extremely valuable as it helps us improve future webinars and ensures that the project responds to real needs and perspectives from the field. So we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a few minutes and complete the evaluation form. Thank you once again for being with us today. And let's now move to the core part of today's webinar. Across Europe, informal care remains heavily gendered. Women continue to provide the majority of unpaid care, while men are still underrepresented in family caregiving roles. In this session, we will explore the issue from 4 complementary perspectives. First, the cultural and structural roots of gender care roles. Second, the barriers men face when engaging in informal care. The benefits of sharing care responsibilities more equally, and what campaigns and policies could promote men's involvement in care. Each speaker will present for around 10-15 minutes. Please feel free to post your questions in the chat and indicate the speaker if relevant. We will address the questions during the discussion later. So moving on to the presentations. The first one is titled Cultural and Structural Roots of Gendered Care Roles. Our first speaker is Dr. Anna Ramovš. She's a medical doctor and researcher at the Anton Trstenjak, I hope I pronounced it well, Institute of Gerontology and Intergenerational Relations in Slovenia. Dr. Ramovš has extensive experience in research on aging, caregiving, and intergenerational solidarity. Her work focuses on understanding how social norms, cultural expectations, and institutional engagements shape the way care responsibilities are distributed within families and societies. In her presentation, she will explore the cultural and structural factors that continue to place the majority of informal care responsibilities on women. Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Svetlana. Let me just try to share my PowerPoint. Can you see it?
Yes.
No, it should be at the beginning. I'm sorry, I jumped somewhere. Okay, perfect. So thank you for kind presentation, and for the, I would also like to say welcome to everybody who managed to come to our webinar. As was mentioned, I come from Anton Trstenjak Institute of Gerontology and Intergenerational Relations, which is Slovenian National Institute for the field of aging and long-term care. And we have a long-term experience working with carers, both formal, but mostly informal, because this field was vastly overlooked in Slovenia, like in a lot of other countries over the years. So let me start with Eurocare's position paper that was published in December 2021, and it's a good introduction into the topic that I was asked to speak about the history of the gendered care. And here the paper was about the gender dimension of informal care, more precisely, and it reads that across Europe, as much as 80% of all care is provided by informal carers, with women providing the lion's share of care, as we could hear earlier also. And these are mostly daughters-in-law, wives, partners. We can read that in all researches across Europe. And it follows that this is due to a deeply ingrained cultural perception of caring roles in our societies, and the fact that care duties often fall into the lap of family members who have lower opportunity costs. And caregiving tends to exaggerate gender pay and pension gaps. And it then calls for the redistribution of care responsibilities between men and women. But before we start, a bit of a history walk into the what happened with the long-term care throughout our history, and also in relations to gender a little bit. Let me ask you, how, if you think about how many women you know who provide care for someone who lives at home, if you could lift your fingers, how many would you lift? Like, just now think from the top of your hand, try to raise your hand so we all wake up, warm up a little bit. How many women can you think of that provide care in your surroundings? If you could just pop up your fingers. Okay, I see something, a lot of fingers popping up, wonderful. And then if you can think about how many men you know that provide care for someone at home in your surroundings, can you also try to show us with fingers? It's more like, you do know some, but it's less. That's the general impression I get. And that's the situation also across Europe. We have men being involved in care, but it's still there is an imbalance between the two. And to understand that, let's do this a bit of a history walk, as I said. And also what I want us to understand with this part of my presentation is that a lot of things changed over the years, nevertheless. So traditional models of care all around the world, they exist all around the world still nowadays, and in many countries they are millennia old. If we look at Europe, long-term care, as was already mentioned in the introduction, was over the millennia responsibility of primary and extended family. And it's mainly rooted in cultural, religious context, in the respect for elderly, which gives a context also, partly links to the context of very patriarchal society. And in such context, women normally bear the most caring burden due to these traditions, as we hear. So if we are all very familiar with the traditional concept of a man being a breadwinner, and then a female, so a woman in a family, being a carer. And it's kind of an archetype that we have in these traditional societies. And also what happened because of this framework, largely patriarchal framework of big part of our history, is that policies also supported that. So they kind of widened the gap when it came to the between genders, because the both it influenced both employment and consequently financial situation. And then it becomes sort of a circle, because someone is gaining less money, is maybe not employed, and then it's even more self-evident that they're in a role of a carer. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy of sorts, and that's part of these traditional patterns going on for a big part of our history. But as I said, a lot of when it comes to care provision, things are changing on many levels. Also from the concept of just primary and extended family being the carer in the 19th century with industry revolution, the care became also, we've seen the development of institutional care. So basically care became a service. So that's the time when we have first service orientated care situations, when we the model that we were changing over the last few decades, because what 20th and 21st century brought afterwards was new challenges. We could see bigger demands in care, but not just in quantity, so more and more people who need care, but also in quality. So a lot of we were not satisfied anymore with just the service provision model. And what developed is what a lot of you, I assume, are from care sector. You all probably, the person-centered care, right? So from this service-oriented model, we slowly moved to more person-centered care, which is based on the needs of a person who needs care. And what's happening now, so if I follow this development a little bit further, this is very much think of the 21st century and maybe the end of 20th century, we are starting to realize that also person-centered care, it's not just about the needs of the person in need of care, but also the needs of the person providing care. So we are now moving towards the relational models. So the most developed models in the field of the care development are probably relational models that take both this into account. So you see, we did a huge walk from only family, extended family, towards institutions and services, and then development towards more person-centered relational care. And together with that, also the roles are a little bit changing. We suddenly got formal carers into the play. Before it was just informal. And then also the perspective of who does what is slowly changing. We can see that in a childcare. Probably, I don't know how we come from, if we would have time, we would speak about different countries and different situations. But we can see a shift in a childcare. It's more and more self-evident that also men get involved in Europe. While in long-term care, we still have a room for improvement. This is a little bit old, but still it shows the direction. It's from 2016. And then we have countries where there's consider that's a percentage of women and men caring for older people with disabilities at least several times per week. And we can see there's a lot of countries with considerably more women who care, more women who care, it's a bit less, no gap, it's the least. And then Germany was supposedly even the other way around, but there is a lot of critique of this concrete research, because it also might be that men were more keen on reporting their care provision than women. But still, it gives us a trend that these gaps are changing, so the differences. But there is always a but. If we look a little bit closer into that, it's still very much embedded our history in the way how we do things. And we can see that because if we look at the activities and the time provided for care, still vastly differs. So it's still very gendered. So normally the more intimate, so hygiene, intensive care would still be more provided by women, even in countries where it's more equal, while or where it seems like there is no gap. But actually, it's still long. What I'm trying to say is that in long-term care, we still have a lot of room for improvement. And because I have limited time for this presentation, I want to take us a little bit further in our thinking. So I took you through a bit of a short and fast history walk, and the roles and the societies, the way how care developed. But the thing is, if we want long-term care to be sustainable in our aging society, it's necessary. Nowadays, it's become vastly evident. That's why we also have this discussion today, that we need to bring together both formal and informal care, and both men and women need to work together if we want care to work. And here, it will not be enough to only do the shifts in terms of rights and the demands, but we have to rethink a little bit the value of care, the universality of care, actually, because our society needs to understand these things, because it's quite rational society to get engaged. So for the last few moments, I want to take you to the journey a little bit towards to help all of us understand that care is really something universal when it comes to needing care and to providing care. And with that, if we think about it, caring for members of our community who cannot care for themselves is something that's characteristic for all civilizations. And we are all born helpless. I mentioned earlier childcare. We are all dependent when we come to this world. And then throughout our lives, we often need help and support. And we are, all of us, sometimes in roles where we give this support. But the dependency, if I talk about dependency, is a very unpopular topic nowadays. And that's also why we have a bit of an issue with the value of care. Because we will have to start to understand that it's very valuable to be independent and to support it, but at the same time, dependency is also a realistic human condition. And we are all sometimes dependent, and it's not a bad thing. That might sound a bit radical, but why I really want us to understand this after today's discussion, and I'll bring it back to the gendered roles, is that we all, my dad, who's also a professor in the gerontology, is professor, and wrote a book on the subject. What he always tends to say is that care provision is the biggest school of solidarity we have. We cannot learn solidarity in books. We cannot learn it we are not born with it. But it's essential for our humanity to stay there, for our society to survive. And solidarity can only be learned by care provision. And this is either caring for children, dependent children, or long-term care when someone needs our support. That's how we learn as humans to learn solidarity. So this is something that's essential. This is not something that's gender. That's where I'm trying to get. So it's both for men and for women providing help, support, care. It's something that makes us human, teaches us solidarity, and that's what's a glue for our society if we want to be there, as I said. So we cannot, without care, basically we have two huge problems. People in need of care need someone to support them, and so they cannot survive. For people in need of care, or for all of us who need sometimes support, it's a matter of survival and quality. And on other sides, for people providing care, it's a matter of learning solidarity, a basic human skill. And now I try to sum it up a little bit, bringing it to an end. I want you to, just before we finish, think again about time when you needed care. What did you gain? Maybe you can write that down on the paper, you have it next to you. Just do it for yourself. We will not share. If we would have time, we could share a bit on that. What did you gain? What did you learn when you received that care from someone? And the same, think about also the time when you provided care for someone. What did you gain, learn at that time when you were providing care for this person? And if you will take time to think about it, as I said earlier, when I indicated a few more general, but then you can go very concrete when you think about your experience, is that care in its essence is very universal. It's not a gender thing. It's human condition. And if we come to realize, as we are realizing very much now, more and more in the childcare I mentioned, then we will also be able to have more gender equal care in the long-term care. And let me give just one last thought before I finish the presentation, is that doesn't mean that as men and women, we don't have different things to bring to the table. There is a lot of very nice research. If I would have time, I would maybe mention some of that as well, where there are specifics to the women who provide care and what they bring in the care, and the men. It's of course a bit generalized, but there are some things that we can each bring that are very valuable. So it's important that we all take part, but it's not a domain of women to provide care, as it is not a domain of men, but it's of all of us. And with that, I'll finish my presentation because I think I took all 15 minutes, but if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer later. Let me see where I stopped here I stopped the sharing.
Well, Anna, thank you very much. Thank you very much for helping us understand the deeper cultural and structural roots behind gender care roles. I would also kindly invite anyone who has any questions to post them in the chat so that our speakers can respond later. Now, moving to the next presentation, men as family carers, overcoming stereotypes and barriers. Our next speaker is Giuseppe Moscarelli. He's a disability studies researcher and advocate from Italy. Giuseppe's work focuses on disability rights, inclusive policies, and the social dimensions of care. Through his research and advocacy, he examines how social expectations and stereotypes influence the way care responsibilities are perceived and distributed. In his presentation today, Giuseppe will focus and discuss on the barriers men face when becoming family carers and how stereotypes around masculinity can discourage men from engaging in informal care. Giuseppe, please go ahead.
Thank you, Svetlana. Good morning, everyone. For my contribution today, I decided to slightly reinterpret this title and give it in a more provocative form. If I were a female disabled caregiver, who cares about me? I would like to begin with the cultural reference that many of you know. In the famous song, If I Were a Boy by Beyoncé, I think you know this song, the singer reflects on how gender shapes expectations, behaviors, and relationships. The song invites us to imagine how things might change if men experience the world from a woman's perspective. Today, I want to reverse that perspective. If the song were titled, If I Were a Woman, society would probably expect something very different. A woman would be expected to care, to support others, and to take responsibility for the well-being of family members. Caregiving would often be seen as natural, almost automatic. This simple thought shows something important. Care is not only a personal act, it is also shaped by social expectations about gender. In many societies, women are still expected to be the primary caregivers within family, especially when disability, illness, or long-term care needs are involved. Men, on the other hand, have traditionally been associated with the role of breadwinner, providing economic stability. But reality is more complex than these stereotypes. Many men today take care of children with disabilities, partners with chronic illness, or elderly parents who need daily support. Some become carers gradually, others suddenly due to an accident. Despite this reality, male carers often remain invisible. They are underrepresented in research, policy discussion, and public narratives about care. One of the main reasons for this invisibility is the persistence of gender stereotypes. Traditional norms present caregiving as women's work, while masculinity is associated with independence, strength, and economic productivity. These cultural expectations influence how both women and men perceive caregiving roles. For women, these expectations can create pressure to assume caregiving responsibilities even when it comes at personal, economic, or professional costs. For men, the opposite pressure may occur. Some men feel caregiving doesn't fit the traditional idea of masculinity. They may hesitate to fully embrace this role or struggle to ask for help and support. This leads to several barriers for men as family carers. Social recognitions. Male carers may feel their role is not fully understood. When support, services, and policy discussions assume carers are women, men may feel excluded. Visibility and representation. Training programs, support groups, and public communication often portray women as the typical caregiver. This reinforces the idea that men are exceptions. Work and employment structures. Men often face pressure to remain fully committed to their professional role. Taking caregiving, leave, or reducing working hours can still be as unusual. Balancing work and care is extremely challenging without flexible arrangements, supportive employers, and inclusive policies. Despite these challenges, increasing male participation in caregiving has many positive effects. First, it contributes to greater gender equality within families. When care responsibilities are shared more equally, women are less burdened. Second, male carers help challenge restrictive gender norms. Caregiving is not determined by gender, but by responsibility, empathy, and relationships. Third, recognizing men as carers strengthens the sustainability of care systems. As European society age, relying only on women for unpaid care is neither fair nor sustainable. So what? we can do to support men as family carers and overcome stereotypes. Mainly, we should increase visibility in order to represent men in research, policy discussion, and public communication. It would be very important also to design inclusive support services like programs and campaigns, address programs and campaigns. It's important also to promote flexible workplaces and raise awareness about these cultural shifts that affect the difference between men and women. I would also conclude saying that if I were a woman, Giuseppe or Giuseppina, as you prefer, I would not only remain a person with disability living with multiple sclerosis, but I would likely face greater social expectation in terms of caregiving and emotional support. In countries like Italy, which has a familistic welfare system, care for children, the elderly, and people with disabilities often falls informally on families, and women frequently carry the largest share. These inequalities are not always recognized or addressed. As many As a man and a person with disability, I also experience care in my daily life. I care for my family and for my wife. Care is not limited to a single gender. It is about connection, responsibility, and community. This is why it is crucial to educate societies to reimagine both caregivers and care receivers. We need to move beyond stereotypes that automatically assign care to women and distance men from it. By redesigning how we think about care, we can create more inclusive, equitable, and supportive communities. And this brings me back to the question at the heart of my session. If I were a female disabled caregiver, who cares about me? The answer is simple. The community should care about me. By breaking barriers, challenging stereotypes, and redesigning our approach to care, exactly as we are doing together today. We move closer to society that supports everyone, regardless of gender or disability. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you, Svetlana. The floor is again yours. And don't hesitate to ask me questions later if you want.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Thank you very much for highlighting the stereotypes and structural barriers that still limit men's participation in informal care. Moving on to presentation number 3, titled The Benefits of Shared Responsibility, Impact on Families and Society. Our third speaker is Heike Grabian from Austria.
So warm welcome also from my side. Hello, I'm trying just to start the PowerPoint presentation.
I was going to present you very quickly for our audience, if that's fine by you.
Yeah, sure, sorry.
So just a few words from so that participants know who you are. Heike is a former member of the Austrian National Council and spokespersons for people with disabilities, with long-standing experience in disability advocacy and social policy. In her presentation today, she will explore the positive impact of sharing care responsibilities more equally, not only for families, but also for the well-being of carers, of those receiving care, and society as a whole. So, Heike, the floor is yours.
So thank you, Svetlana. Sorry for my rushing in. I'm looking forward to see you all and have my presentation. Today's topic or I try at least to scratch on the surface in 10 minutes or 15 minutes of the benefits of shared responsibilities and the impact on families and society. What is shared responsibility? Shared responsibility refers to the distribution of duties, decision makings, caregiving, financial obligations, and emotional support among members of family and, of course, of communities. Rather than placing the burden on a single individual, as we heard, mostly females, shared responsibility, the concept of this, promotes cooperation, equality, solidarity, and mutual respect towards each other. In modern society, as we heard from Anna already, we have a shift, of course, and some things are changing. And in modern societies where economic pressure, the shifting gender roles, and diverse family structures are more common and more visible, the concept of shared responsibility has become increasingly important. When we include the factor of disability, the importance of shared responsibility becomes even more evident. Disability can affect individuals, families, and communities profoundly. But when responsibility is shared effectively, families become stronger and society becomes more inclusive, compassionate, and productive. That's a fact. Shared responsibility in families, such as childcare, household work, financial management, and emotional support, if they are shared, family members, of course, feel more valued, more seen and respected. We all know that from each other and from our self-experience. Cooperation builds trust and improves communication. In families where a member has a disability, shared responsibility prevents caregiver burnout. We know that also from talking to parents, especially with children of disability, that they feel alone and not seen, and they feeling like they don't have time for anything else than just caring for their children. And when parents share that's their responsibility, we have studies that neither parents become overwhelmed. So siblings may also participate in age-appropriate ways in fostering understanding rather than resentment. And shared responsibility transforms caregiving from a burden into a collective effort rooted in solidarity. This is especially important in families that include disability, where appointment, therapy sessions, accessibility planning, and emotional support require coordination and time. And for families, emotional support is crucial. When family members share responsibility, individuals feel supported rather than isolated. There is a super nice study that has been made first in Norway and Poland, and then afterwards in Austria. It's called the Gender Equality and Quality of Life. And it showed the benefits of involved fatherhood, including better relationship quality and healthier lives, as well as lower risk of conflict and domestic violence. Means the risk of a physical violence is greatest for children in families where the father alone has the final say in important decisions. The risk of violence is lowest for children who grew up in families where important decisions are made jointly. In such families are characterized by a better balance in terms of distribution and care work. The traditional hegemonic demands of masculinity are based on the pursuit of power and competition and come at a cost. Neglecting relationships, risky behavior, often unhealthy lifestyles, and even violence. Relationship-oriented concepts of masculinity signify liberation from these restrictive norms of masculinity. The social cost of this form of toxic masculinity, we call also in science, you probably heard that word before, is very, very high. And there's from Boris von Hazen, he is working in the critical man studies in Germany. He wrote a book, it says What Man Costs. For the first time, we have actually costs of this toxic masculinity, and it amounts at least 63 billion euros annually in Germany. And that is a normal financial burden on society through addictions like alcohol, tobacco, crimes, traffic accidents, and unhealthy diets. I tried to make a statistic out of it, but I don't want to bore you with the numbers. It just shows where the costs are mostly and biggest. And it's and this cost results from this traditional gender role and lead men to engage in riskier behavior, harming not only society but also the men themselves. And in conclusion, I just can say to that slide, the price of patriarchy is high, and reducing this cost requires new non-traditional lifestyles for all gender. We all benefit, men especially. So, but I come to the benefits. For women, of course, it's self-explanatory. If we have more economic empowerment, we have higher labor force participation, the elimination of the gender pay gap, and further on the pension pay gap, and improved access to leadership positions. It's self-determination and education, better access to education and a job market, especially for women with disability or men with disability, but even there is a gender gap in that. We have studies that men with disability find more often jobs than females with disability. Safety and health, increased safety through a reduction in violence. There's also statistic that females with disability more often are confronted with violence than females without disability. And health, of course, studies showed that gender equality contributes to women living longer. So what are the benefits for men? Studies also show that men live longer when gender equality is practiced. Isn't that nice? Good news. And the relief from the traditional gender roles can free up men and from that pressure of being that sole breadwinner, what Anna also said and explained, and Giuseppe, and can utilize more flexible working hours. We have better and deeper relationships also to other men. Men also need network, not just only females. And mental health, reducing traditional norms of masculinity can have a psychological relieving effect. Also, studies are showing that. Sorry, what I forgot about this, there's also benefits for us as social and economic. The increased gross domestic product if females are higher employment. We know that mixed teams are more creative and more productive, and they solve problems better together. There is improved productivities in companies, and we have a higher tax revenues for the state, very interesting, and reducing strain on social welfare systems. So overall, gender equality leads to more just a peaceful and productive society where we all just benefit from it. So when we have shared responsibility and disability, of course, I need to point that out especially. Disability is a social issue. It's not an individual. The ways families and society respond to disability determines whether individuals experience inclusion or exclusion. Over 1 billion worldwide live with some form of disability, and highlighting the importance of collectively responsibility in building inclusive systems. The social model of disability explains that people are often disabled by social barriers such as inaccessible buildings, discrimination, the lack of laws, and the lack of support systems. So shared caregiving and community support is highly important. What Giuseppe said, I really like that. Caregiving is one of the most demanding forms of responsibility. When a family member carries this alone, it can lead to emotional exhaustion and financial hardship. Shared caregiving may involve extended family participation, community volunteer programs, professional support services, and government-assisted programs. Community-based shared responsibility reduces isolation and increases quality of life for both caregivers and individuals with disabilities. I would really like to go on what is with inclusive education, as we have high problems with that in Austria, and a long-term discussion about inclusion, exclusion in school system already, and the hard time for parents to find a good place for the childcare. But I need to go on with my slides, but maybe we have afterwards a bit time that you share your experience from different countries about that. So I would be very curious about. We have also shared responsibility in workplaces. When men take unpaid care work, companies can no longer ignore that fact that they have children and that they need to care. This holds potential for a better work-life balance for all genders and for a greater gender equality in professional life. But it's also a fact that many Europeans still often have to justify why they have chosen to take on care work. During the COVID pandemic, there was a bit of a shift. Many men spent many weeks at home with partners, children, friends, and other people for the first time. And for many of them, this home care work was visible for the very first time. So they started to emphasize and understand what actually their mostly female partners are doing. Politically, men must be recognized in their caregiving responsibilities. Countries with high rates of paternal participation, for example, have introduced a non-transferable use it or lose it parental leave model, which is very, very successful, and which is income and compensated and fully paid. That is important. And as soon as parental leave ends, children must be granted the right to access affordable full-day and high-quality childcare. This means closing the childcare gap, and especially the childcare gap with children with disabilities. And reduction in working hours for that time where we have more care work to do contributes significantly the wage losses and primarily penalizes women. And in addition, we need to create more measures to promote the participation of men in the care work and in the work for people who are in need of care. And employers have a big role on that. They need to support men's active care work. And the conclusion, I think it's self-explanatory. Shared responsibility strengthens families, gender equality, inclusion for people with disability, and of course we have economic and social well-being. And I hope you get today, for those who didn't, you get now a hammer so you can smash the patriarchy together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Heike, for highlighting how a more balanced care responsibility can benefit families, communities, and the entire care system. Now moving on to our final presentation for today, changing mindsets, campaigns, and policy measures promoting men's involvement in informal care. Our final speaker today is Mr. Juhana Mäkintoili. He's an inclusive care advocate from Finland. Juhana has been actively involved in promoting more inclusive approaches to care and supporting initiatives that encourage broader participation in caregiving roles. In his presentation, Juhana will discuss campaigns and policy measures that aim to promote men's involvement in informal care and challenge traditional stereotypes around masculinity and care. He will also share his personal experience as caregiver. So, Juhana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here. First of all, I want to show where I am. We've been in Lapland now to Levi, and we start my wife's 50th birthday party this afternoon. Okay, I am Juhana Mäkintoili from Finland, about 400 kilometers north to Helsinki, and I'm 54 years old. My family includes wife and total of 6 children. The oldest will soon be 33 years old, and youngest is 9 years old. 4 boys and 2 girls. We have a big family. I've been a salesman in different companies in my working life. The last which was Vietnam, the Germany company whose main business in alternative, so-called green energy. In 2011, I injured my back in an accident while doing renovations at home. That was the beginning, a long struggle and survival, both mentally and physically, and very hard to be alone because who can't help me? I lost my ability to work, and I started to seriously rehabilitate myself both mentally and physically. In 2030, I met my current wife, with whom I have 2 children. Our first child was born in 2050, and son comes to 2060. And 2070, he was diagnosed with spastic hemiplegia and epilepsy, which together constitute a developmental. The beginning was really hard and tough because the finances were tight and there was a sick child at home. My wife was like a lioness who wanted to keep her cups close. From the beginning, we decided that we would take care of our child ourselves, no matter how difficult it was. I often felt like an outside and had to find my own place in terms of the caregiving relationship with my own child. I had to be a strong one who created faith that everything would be okay. I also had to be strong with my own disability. In my previous life, during my first marriage, I was the one who worked really hard and brought the money and food to the table. This was how I was taught that the man was responsibility. When my father says every time, you must remember that. I wasn't there to hear the child say their first words or takes their first steps. I only brought home money. Well, go to this day's agenda. I try to tell you, when I see many families every week and they have many problems, I try to tell you what I do. Every child is entitled to equal parents, and every parent is entitled to equal parenting. Fathers are often left on the outside because the mother is already, during the waiting period, close to child and therefore many closely involved in everything. Fathers must, in a way, dare to take their own place in the care of the child and also dare to ask questions in order to become good caregiver. Many men says, when I talk to parents, they don't have a time or do something for their children, and then I told them there's 365 days in a year, and you sleep 8 hours and you work 8 hours. What you do 8 hours? What is your free time? Go to gym or run or something. And I told them, why you want to do? Why you are not to do something with your children? We live a family life where I do the laundry, cook, and sometimes even clean. My wife change the tires on the car when necessary. That is our family's something. When I'm retired and my wife works 3 shifts at a housing service for autistic people, we both have wrote the same amount of money for the family coffers. We often switch rules during the week so that I can do more than just be with the children. I give a lot of lectures about the everyday life, a special choice from a father's perspective to various professionals and students. Of course, it makes things easier than I have struggled with my own ailments for several years. So it's easier to talk about my own child's challenges without causing resentment. I also visit clients with social service to help families who have a challenge with their child and are at the risk of, for example, taking a child into the care. We have often come across the topic of whose fault is that a child is, for example, mentally disabled. Families may talk and compare that there is no mental disability in our family and do not want to accept the facts and often want to push the matter aside. We must not compare things. For example, when it comes to her health, who among us can say that they are perfect as they are? When I was able to work and I fit to work, I was defined in my circle of friends by my work. My annual salary was slightly under 2,100 euros, and I was enviable in people's eyes. Simple because I worked it really hard, and I actually also experienced what it means to be greedy. I mean greedy for money. What did I do with the money? Nothing. I have thought about many times afterwards that I didn't know myself at all. I was moving forward like a machine that wanted more and more. So what did I lose? I lost my children's little child, everyday life, and perhaps partly also my health, because I was moving forward like a machine. My family had everything I needed and maybe even too much. Was I happy? Well, I wasn't. Think about it that way afterwards. My current life is much more meaningful. I can live with my discipline. I get to spend time with my children, and there is no pressure from work at all. I think about money that less is more. I have a relation that the money I received every year was really too little money for I lost. When families get tired, they don't care to ask for help because they are afraid to social work and child protection professionals. Why? I always tell families that when they tell everything they need to know about their practical and everyday challenges, they will also get to the right kind of help and support. Things need to give a face that professionals also need to listen to and respect. My job description is everyday life with families is that I say things out loud because families don't care. And this way we got to hear of the matter faster so that no one has to afraid. I go different schools to talk about invisible diversity. In sexual discipline and other topics that are different from many everyday tasks. Schools often bring up to needs acceptance, for example, how different religions, different skin colors, and same-sex relationship must be accepted. But one important fact, disability is given too little attention. I can tell you my own example of what it feels like live in a world where many people have a work community or some others interested group to which they belong. I don't belong to any. This is one big thing that will help new generation understand the challenges of the words diversity. Every time when I talk about school, I tell every young students, my wife is work and I be home, my two children. And many times when we talk about with families, I ask when they said must be a lot of money, and then I ask this kind: money can buy a house but not a home. Money can buy a watch but not time. Money can buy bed but not sleep. Money can buy doctor but not health. Money can buy insurance but not safety. And then these words, they think about it. You don't have to do a lot of money because why you need the money a lot? You need only you can pay bills and get food and something. And then when we start speaking together, I ask, listen, and encourage. It's good. I have often thought about the fact that in my career, I have about 28,000 client meetings, and that truth that I have learned to accept it, diversity, and perhaps also to recognize the different needs that each of us has. However, we all have a common denominator, and that is human dignity. Who I am today? I am family man and a husband. I still do my job to help others. I get to the part of the students care group at the special needs school. I get to the chairman of the boards of the local caregivers association. I get to be involved in development work, for example, today. I get to by myself with all my troubles, but still be the best version of myself here and now. And always, everybody remember, a winner never give up. A winner never gives up, and giver never wins. Thank you for letting me share this morning with you. I hope you heard what I say.
Thank you very much to all our speakers for these really insightful contributions. So today we have heard how deeply rooted gender norms influence care responsibilities, how stereotypes continue to discourage men from engaging in caregiving roles, how sharing care responsibilities can benefit families and societies, and how campaigns, different policies can help shift cultural expectations and promote change. These insights are extremely valuable, and they bring us to our moderated discussion for today. So let's start with a few questions from the audience. And then if we have time, we may invite speakers to briefly react to each other's perspectives. I don't see any questions in the chat, so perhaps you have decided to ask your questions directly. The floor is yours. If someone wishes to speak and to ask questions, please raise your hand or just unmute yourselves and go directly.
I think we can't hear you, Evelyn, no?
Is anyone speaking?
Yeah, Evelyn is trying to join in, but her microphone doesn't seem to be working. She's working on it from what I can see.
Hello, can you hear me
Yeah.
now?
Now we can hear you.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Evelyn Havel, and I'm a researcher from Austria. And I wanted to ask, have you also thought about what would help men to get more involved?
Maybe I can go first, and then
Thank
I'll
you,
let
Evelyn.
the
Yes, please, Anna, go ahead. Yeah.
rest of the speakers also chip in. Well, we did two types of researches so far on the topic. We also work with municipalities and are trying to see how to encourage men to participate in long-term care. And also the project that Svetlana mentioned at the beginning about equal care, it's partly also addressing this subject. So in the project itself, if I go from the last part, what we are doing is we try to come up with a curricula for formal, mostly for formal care, but also for, in our case in Slovenia, also for informal care. And it's partly made in a way to encourage these discussions and thinking in different groups. On the level of municipalities, when we work and research we got there, it's actually, we are trying to come up with it seems like positive examples, my work. That's also the very good example on that from the child care, where men have a form of child rearing, and maybe something like that could be interesting also for some generations of men. It's none of these solutions is universal, but basically, at least in Slovenia and also looking in some other countries of our consortia in the project, when it comes to the research part of data, and I think it's also what Giuseppe mentioned earlier, it's the perception, it's the stereotypes about how men work should look like. And then if men hear of stories like we just heard now the last part, that's also valuable and doesn't make you less or more of a man because you provide care into human experience that might be part of the puzzle. And then it's the positive image of a childcare that's now coming up and all that might play part of the solution that's pop up also in the research. That's from my part, but I let the other three speakers also.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anya. Is anyone from the other speakers ready to intervene? Yeah, Giuseppe, please go ahead.
Okay, as Anna said before, we cannot learn solidarity in books. So I really think we can work on men just translating research into politics. This is very important. As Heike said before, we should work on parental leave for fathers, for example. I live in Italy. To change the parental leave in my country would be very helpful in order to involve men in care about family. This doesn't work. This doesn't happen because in Italy, for example, only few days are allowed for men to take care of their family. So I think the real revolution is to translate all this research, all these experiences, like the experience of Joanna, into political action and effective laws.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Giuseppe. Any of the other speakers? Do you want to respond to Evelyn?
If it's okay, Anna, I think you raised up your hand.
Yeah, you go first. I'll go. It is just something Giuseppe reminded me, but go first by all means, because I already spoken.
Okay, thank you. No, I just, of course, I just can agree with Anna and Giuseppe said, Evelyn, but there are some nice studies, if you want to read that, about Alice Gambor from the Kritische Männlichkeitsforschung. I'm sorry that I speak now German, but Evelyn, I think, is Austrian. So she also pointed out what can be done and what would be helpful, and also by studies that she made in the European Union and also for Austria especially. But yes, I just can, as a former politician, I just can tell you it's very hard. In Austria, we have very traditional norms of gender, and females are fighting for their role and men are fighting for their roles. But there are some nice little changes are made, and activists who are showing a different aspect on caring fatherhood. For example, we know that men who are taking paternal leave in their companies for the first time, they really have to fight for it. And that they have to be very, very strong actually to receive the paternal leave. And even if it's for just a few months. But what we also see, if one man starts in a company, others following. So it's, as I'm also not just a former politician, I'm also an activist. I can just tell you also very often something that you have to be brave. You have to do the first step and maybe take also the risk that come with it. And then we are maybe also have the point that we need a supportive system around us to be strong enough and brave enough to do that. So just from a personal view.
Thank you very much, Heike. Anna?
Yeah, I'll actually just build a little bit on what was just said by both Giuseppe and Heike. It's, in Slovenia, we have opportunity for men to take leave, and it is more and more widely used now. But it's true that at the beginning, looking a few years ago, when it was more exceptional, it was by the examples that others followed. So it's really, that's why I emphasize positive stories before examples, because that's what brings about the change. So thank you to both of you to emphasize also this policy part. That's very, very important. And another thing that I forgot to mention earlier, it's again a little bit abstract, but also quite concrete in a way, is there's a lot of going on if you look up the universality of care that I spoke about earlier, because that's another train of thought, but basically it's a lot of on different levels, from scientific to conferences, meetings, but also organizations are now starting to shift towards more universality of care approach, and that also changes a bit the mind shift, because it's really a mind shift that has to happen for us to contribute equally to in care. And I think it's also another thing that will help us both in Austria and the rest of the countries is the necessity. We don't like to talk about that, but Europe is aging and care, we don't have enough staff. So basically, for better or worse, some things will encourage us. It's just that we also understand the meaning behind it, that we don't, that I'm always fighting not to push it away from the family, not to push it away from women, because it's also relevant for families and for women, but to really make it everybody's story and together, because that's the only way that's going to be sustainable.
Thank you very much, Anna. Pauline, I see that you have your hand raised. Do you want to take the floor?
Thank you, Svetlana, and thank you all for your insightful testimonials and contributions. My name is Pauline Vicar, and I am working for the European Federation for Family Employment and Home Care. I just wanted to know, it's an open question for all panelists. What is your approach towards home care? I mean, we speak today about informal carers, but working on home care, I received a lot of testimonials and experience from my national member organizations, which basically view home care as a respite solution for informal carers. And in home care sector, we try to make this sector more attractive for women and men, with training solutions, better wages, better income. And I would like to hear your views on making a balance between informal care, but also home care as a respite solution for both fathers and mothers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pauline, for the reflections and for this interesting question. Who wants to respond first from our speakers, but also from the audience? Please feel free to share your thoughts.
I can go first since I started the panel, but then I don't want to take over the floor. So, well, our institute, as I mentioned earlier, works in the field of long-term care, and it's both formal and informal. So we do both research and developmental work in both fields. And as I said in my presentation, they are complementary. They cannot go one without another, to be honest. especially if we want to have any type of sustainability long term. And also working with Eurocarers now, being also on the board, it's what we often talk about. It's that it's essential for sustainability of informal care to be supported. So it's very important, it's relevant, it's not something that we want to take away, but at the same time, if it's not properly supported, it's not sustainable in itself. We heard earlier, Heike, you said that there is also burnout, it's also difficult, it's not all great. So, I mean, it gives a lot, but it also takes a lot. And that's why it's very important to get information, knowledge, which informal carers often lack, but also to get concrete forms of support. And here, home care is definitely essential because it gives you, well, some free time, maybe some tasks are taken over. So it's basically, we cannot talk about integrated care or any type of sustainable informal care without home care. So it's very connected picture. And maybe one interesting research, since we are here talking a little bit more about the gender perspective, and you said you're also working a lot of trying to attract people, both genders, into the profession. We did research not long ago, some still ongoing, with some home care institutions and home for elderly. And it's interesting also to see how the stereotypes Giuseppe talked about so integrated that in our society, that it's not only that men, it's not just the masculinity. We get some men who are willing to provide care, but then care receivers are reluctant sometimes because they are women and they don't want a man to provide care. So it's multi layers that we'll have to work on that and have discussions. But normally they were all very welcoming towards men, and the question was how to invite them more into the sector. And here it comes, I mean, the danger of repeating myself constantly, but it's really understanding the value of care that will help to get also men in the value of care in terms of philosophical, that it has a value, but also in very concrete way with that it's properly paid and all that will get men in the sector more.
Thank you, Adam. Does anyone else want to join this discussion? Yes, please, Spiridon.
Okay, before I underlined the importance of formal care run by the state, but at the same time, I want to underline the importance not only of a social change, but of something deeper, we need a real cultural change. It means that me, as man, as disabled person, I'm fully committed to the home care of my family. This is something we can change at a community level, doing networks and participating to activities like this one in order to have a real cultural change. So it is important, a formal shift, but at the same time, we should work on how we perceive our role in society as men.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe. Spiridon from Ipioni, I saw that you had your hand raised before.
Yes. I would like to congratulate you, Johanna, for being such a good parent. And I don't know how old is he or how many years he is doing or he is being a parent. I would like also to say that we are very much interested in receiving concrete suggestions to policymakers on how they can promote gender equality agenda for caregivers. So I don't know, this will be the final result of this project, or you already have some policy recommendations? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Spiridon. I think your question is more for ASPD's project lead to respond. I don't know, Tiziana, if you want to reply to this, or what is also possible, we can share the email addresses of the attendees of today's conference, so we can get in touch one-on-one afterwards. I will wait for Tiziana to respond, but very quickly, we're still in the process of implementing the tasks of the project. The project ends by the end of the year. All results will be final and public, yes, by the end of 2026. And we will, as usual, distribute all the results to Eurocares members, and I suppose the partners from the consortium will also do the same. So yes, I mean, the outcome will be public.
We are interested to submit a similar project in Greece to do in various cities, not only in Athens, but in smaller cities, and talk about those gender roles of caregiving, and talk with the policymakers to ask them some concrete ways to support.
That's a great idea, and once again, you can do a follow-up of this project with the help of one or several of the current participants. But yeah, I mean, you can get in touch and discuss future plans later. Is there anyone who has a question or wants to intervene and discuss the questions that have already been raised? Doesn't seem to be the case. So I think we have reached the end of today's seminar. Just a few closing remarks. First of all, I would like to warmly thank all of our speakers for their valuable contributions and for your participation and thoughtful questions, the audience. Today's discussion has clearly shown that gender inequality in informal care is not inevitable. It is shaped by cultural expectations, institutional structures, and long-standing ideas about gendered roles. Encouraging greater involvement of men in care is not simply about sharing responsibilities differently. It's also about changing social norms, improving well-being for families, and building a more sustainable and equitable care system. The reflections shared today will feed directly into the ongoing work of Equal Care Project, which continues to explore how gender stereotypes influence both paid and unpaid care work, and how they can be challenged through policy practice and awareness raising. As mentioned at the beginning, this webinar is part of the broader Equal Care webinar series, which will continue over the coming months. Our next webinar will focus on work, informal care, and financial well-being. It will look at the financial impact of caregiving and the challenges carers face when balancing employment and care responsibilities. The webinar will take place on the 11th of June this year. We will share more information about the upcoming webinars with you very soon. After the webinar, as I mentioned, next week we will send you a follow-up email, including a link to a short evaluation survey. Your feedback is very valuable and very important so that we can improve the future events. Thank you once again for your time and engagement. I wish you a good rest of the day, and I hope to see you again in the next Equal Care webinar on the 11th of June.